For Chapter 4, Key Issue 4, we are going to be looking at sustainability for both folk and popular culture. Essentially, both types of culture are going to face sustainability challenges, meaning there are things that are going to get in the way to continue pop culture. There will be things getting in the way to continue folk culture as well. Keep in mind, folk culture's greatest challenge is the expansion and globalization of popular culture through electronic media. This is what's kind of changing the uniqueness, if you will, about different folk culture. Culture, on the other hand, the greatest challenge for that is these uniform landscapes continuing to make everything very similar. That's going to come at a cost, and the high rate of consumption. How many of the different things in popular culture we continue to want. We always want more shoes. We always want more jeans. All of these kind of have a price for us here. Well, here is simply looking at this neighborhood here. You can see all these kind of uniform houses that are very similar to each other, but they're also a popular type of house that is very popular. But notice all the land that is being used, all the resources that are needed to kind of continue to sustain this type of popular culture. Moving on to the slide here, we do have an example kind of that high rate of consumption. All these different digital music players that we had before no longer usable. They're in landfills, nowhere to go. So we're going to have to find a place for these things. And then in addition, we're going to need more resources to have more and more of these different items. For beginning here, for the folk culture, one of the things we've talked about a lot is the increasing contact folk culture, like the Amish, have with popular culture. The more contact they have, it now starts to challenge their old practices that they've had for centuries. Are they going to change to the new way? Are they going to continue to do the ways they have throughout the years? When they're presented with these new ways, they have this ultimate question: should we preserve our identity, our culture, or should we embrace the modern world? Is this actually going to be better? Is it easier for us? Or kind of is our culture a little more important? Another challenge is when they actually do choose to stay and keep all with their full culture and keep their identity. Is that still going to change? Is modern society going to continue to make them change, even though they decided they have not want to change? Perfect example of folk culture that is always kind of in the battle with the modern world would be the Amish. We looked at the Amish as a religious group, have a certain way of living, like to not have any modern electronics, not to have any kind of modernization in their lives. Their life is very plain. Simplicity is part of their faith. A sense of community, not individualism, with their strong faith. As we talked about in class, there's roughly 250,000 of Amish here in the United States today. Keep in mind where many of them have migrated from Europe because they felt persecuted during the 18th and 19th centuries, which is going to be the 1700s and the 1800s. Kind of one reason you know the Amish is going to be a little more folk culture is this kind of idea right here. When they did come to the United States, they purchased cheap land. They didn't need extravagant land. They just needed simply cheap land, kind of which they could farm on and kind of be isolated from the rest of the world. Keep in mind some of these patterns you can notice here. Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, northeastern Indiana, and then kind of north and north central Wisconsin have a large Amish population. So it's good to kind of know where they have kind of migrated throughout the years. Specific example of the Amish here would be Lancaster, Pennsylvania. This is like the oldest Amish community in the United States. The impact that modernization kind of has had on the Amish is that in Lancaster, it used to be the largest one, but now it's steadily shrinking since the 1990s. And the reason for this is because of modernization, because of high real estate land prices. They cannot really afford a lot of the prices because of how close they are to Philadelphia. It's an urban area. You have a lot of expensive land. Okay, now because the land is very expensive, they can no longer afford it. So therefore, they're having to start moving out and start moving into places like Kentucky, rural side of Kentucky, where land is a lot cheaper than they can afford. So this is one reason how modernization is kind of impacting them. Even though they do not want to change, they're having to relocate and migrate based on this idea of globalization and popular culture kind of raising up prices and making them relocate. All Amish kind of are created equally when you talk about them being affected by modernization. It really truly depends on how close they are to some of these urban centers. The further away they are from these urban centers, the less they're going to be impacted. So if they're near a major city, notice kind of the Amish in Wisconsin are actually kind of in between Minneapolis and Milwaukee, a very distinct rural area in Wisconsin. The idea of modernization kind of going into full culture with the Amish is today they now have two kind of branches, if you will, of the Amish. You have the New Order and the Old Order. Obviously, the Old Order is going to be more strict. They're not really kind of embracing any of the change or modernization. However, the New Order is allowed to have some electronics, anything to really help their day-to-day farming life. Beards can be trimmed. So basically, they have modernized a little bit. So even though you have people within that culture not wanting to change, you do still have some, like a fraction within there, that do want to change kind of throughout. Moving over here, we got a kind of an example of the New Order Amish, if you will. Notice they are wearing jeans, though they still have their hats, beards. Women still have the headdress kind of on. So modernized a little bit, but they're still very distinct where you can kind of recognize them as Amish. The fusion of a lot of these popular culture ideas throughout the world have now, especially the idea of women getting an education, working, putting off having kids, have now kind of embedded into other cultures. So the United Kingdom, the United States, these places kind of have a more forward thinking for women, and now this is kind of affecting local customs elsewhere in the world. Kind of one of the customs they they are affecting in the world is Saudi Arabia, with women there. Generally, Islam is very conservative. They have a lot of restrictions for women, what they can wear, what they can't wear. Generally, they have limited opportunities. They have to wear a piece of clothing that covers their entire body. And then this one, in addition, is kind of the most obvious. They're prohibited from driving alone without having a male relative with them in the car. So they have very, very kind of little independence. Now, how is popular culture kind of imposing on this? With social media, there's many campaigns both inside Saudi Arabia and outside of Saudi Arabia that women in Saudi Arabia are now seeing what the rest of the world has, that women can drive most places in the world without having a male around. They're okay driving alone, it's safe, etc. And now they kind of want that from themselves. So the folk belief is there should be a lot of restrictions on women. The popular belief around the world is that they should have more freedom, they should be able to drive. So they started having a hashtag campaigns over the last couple of years. Couple different mock posters here. We can do it. Big poster during World War II where women in the United States took on the workforce here. Now in Saudi Arabia, they're basically saying, hey, we can actually drive our cars. So now they start having all these campaigns in Saudi Arabia, which is really threatening to the folk establishment of Saudi Arabia that really tries to promote the religious values of that country. So now you have women driving around, protesting, randomly holding up these signs. They don't want to get caught, so this is actually kind of a risky move kind of on their part. So now in some places, however, full culture, or so, excuse me, popular culture has actually made life harder for women, especially in India where you have that concept of a dowry, which is basically a gift from the bride's to the groom's family. Traditionally, this was something small. It was just more of a token, symbolic. Really wasn't very tangible. It really wasn't something that was going to cost a lot of money. But kind of over time, since the 1950s, mid-20th centuries, dowries have now become kind of a mainstream popular culture idea in India, even though it's in a rural folk area. The idea that they want these popular culture material in exchange for their daughter, in exchange for their son being married to the daughter. So the daughter's family has to provide this. A lot of times the groom's parents aren't going to accept the marriage unless this is actually paid in full, or if there is a dowry that is actually offered. And notice kind of some of the things they want now: cars, jewelry, television, computers, just simply to marry their son. In these rural villages, what happens is a lot of times women are beaten, they're thrown out, they're disowned by the groom's family, they could be violently attacked, and this usually goes largely unchecked because it is a rural area. You don't have as much rights there or civil laws, you don't have a lot of police in that area, you don't have a lot of law and order. Roughly 25,000 women a year lose their lives because of this in India. Kind of sum this last part up here. Essentially, full culture sustainability truly depends on the intrusion of popular culture. If it starts coming in, full culture is going to lose its sustainability. If it's isolated, if it stays away from popular culture, it has a better chance to sustain longer throughout their traditions. So now we're going to look at the sustainability challenges for popular culture. Essentially, popular culture, we may not be able to keep this idea of popular culture going. We may end up resources. We may not have enough areas to kind of emerge. But essentially, popular culture is often separate from and imposed upon the actual landscape itself. One kind of place you kind of see modern golf courses, especially in Western world, especially in the United States. We are kind of changing this landscape. This is not entirely actual normal landscape. These are man-made mounds here. All of this is essentially man-made. We're not going with the land. These people probably just saw a forest and decided to design all this on their own. This kind of creates a uniform landscape because all the other Western type, modern, most developed country golf courses are going to look very, very similar to these kind of golf courses. So for their customers, it's good to be familiar, familiar ideas. This is kind of part of the experience they're kind of paying for. So regardless of the environment, popular culture will change it and change the landscape to suit its needs currently. This idea of placelessness, basically how popular culture landscapes erase local identity. So whatever that area used to be kind of known for, or the identity of that area, or physical features that used to be there, what popular culture does is kind of erase that and makes it a little more uniform. Keep in mind that uniform landscape idea. So you can look at one place for 2 seconds, close your eyes, be zoomed somewhere else, look for 2 seconds. You might think you're in a very similar place, but you could be in very opposite ends of the country mainly because of popular culture trying to create this uniform landscape. Keep in mind you have all these very similar neighborhoods. All these houses all look very similar. Trying to keep everything the same. But again, look how much environment this is actually using, the space it's using, the resources it's using just to continue to sustain this. So these uniform landscapes aren't necessarily always bad. Generally, they're used by companies to kind of promote product recognition. So essentially, if you're traveling or if you're not familiar with the place, you do have familiar places. If you go to McDonald's, you kind of know what you're going to get. If you go to a Home Depot, you know the setup. And you go to Houston, Texas, if you go to a Home Depot, it's going to have a very, very similar setup. It's for people to go to all these places and kind of be very, very familiar or comfortable with the surroundings that they're in. So an example here is you have a Starbucks, Wells Fargo, it's a popular bank. You have a kind of liquor store, a pharmacy. Every place has this. You have very little identity kind of here. You have an idea, maybe the Red Horse Plaza. What could that mean? That could be some sort of cultural identity there, but it could just be the only name they really thought of at that time. So this is California, but it could be many other places. Any place that has a Starbucks, any place that has a Wells Fargo, which is a lot of different places in the United States. So now this idea that we have popular landscapes, we're making everything the same, we're changing the environment is essentially kind of responsible for environmental degradation, which is basically kind of just kind of destroying the environment, not really having as much care for it. Again, this is mainly an example of popular culture because of our excess purchase, consumption. We now need places to put all this stuff, and this is essentially popular culture on the cultural landscape here. This is not natural, but you can see that our culture wastes a lot of materials. We don't recycle. We go through a lot of things, and now we need a place to kind of put all this. So this kind of shows that popular culture is imposed on the environment rather than our culture is built within the environment or built around the environment or built because of the environment. So again, these golf courses are a really good example. Notice kind of how this golf course kind of goes with the natural landscape. You see the wearing down of the grasses here. They're not using a lot of water to keep these greens really nice and neat. A lot of places are very uncut. Simply just go out and play golf in nature is kind of how it's meant to be. Where you go to a United States golf course here, or not here in Maryland, but in Maryland, they've changed everything. This is an entire forest that they just cut through, okay? So take a look here. Your little prairie area off of a coast here, pretty good spot for it. But here in the middle of a forest, we're going to make a neighborhood, and then we're going to cut all these trees down and impose on here this golf course. Notice how green everything looks. That's not just because it's natural. They're using a lot of resources to actually impose to keep these grasses looking clean. So anytime a golfer comes on there, it's that familiar idea. You have nice green fairways throughout the course. So in our everyday life, we're really exposed here in the United States to popular culture. However, this does put a great deal of demand on natural resources, especially in kind of like the 80s. Fur culture really popular. It almost drove some animals to near extinction, especially when we had the fur trade here a couple hundred years ago with the French, kind of nearly extincting a lot of local animals. Also, you can kind of see we're taking over a lot of land, getting rid of a lot of natural resources. In addition, we're cutting down all these trees as well to kind of build houses and these big structures. So the idea is popular culture is sustainable. Some people feel it might be. Others feel we only can continue popular culture because of our natural resources. Excuse me. Once we lose those natural resources, we will no longer be able to sustain pop culture. Again, another one of these main reasons is because of consumption. Consumption basically produces a lot of waste. Now this is one, going to hurt the environment, and two, we have to kind of find somewhere to continue to put this waste somewhere. Where you see kind of in folk cultures, they tend to produce very little waste, but on the other end, popular culture use and discard mentality. So as soon as you use it, it might break in a little bit. You just throw it away and you go buy a new one because it's actually going to cost you cheaper, kind of because of globalization, to actually buy that new blender, that new coffee maker, rather than going to a service shop and spending that same amount of money to get it repaired. So now, how are we trying to sustain popular culture? This is one way we're trying to actually sustain popular culture, is through recycling. So all that consumption, all that waste we have, if we start recycling, it's actually going to be help to sustain popular culture. Recycling paper, helping trees, plastic, so it's not getting in the ocean, so we can continue to popularly use those kind of for recreational activities, etc. Good kind of picture here, or chart if you will. This is waste per capita, so per person, for the most part has been kind of steady, risen since the 1980s, but it's slowly steadying off here. We're trying not to consume any more than we are, but however, recycling rate is going up, so recycling is getting more and more common. When we start talking about technology and industrialization, that might be a really good thing for us to kind of look at, is to kind of see how technology is actually helping us to sustain popular culture, as opposed to technology is the thing that's kind of hurting popular culture